but if not, maybe alert Karen, or if you can.
I can see it.
Karen has done welcome. So a little bit of an introduction from myself. I don't know who exactly was on the call the last time we were together, but I think it's worthwhile me just giving you a quick introduction to myself and Genesis. So my name is Conor Cavan, Consulting Director at Genesis, and what Genesis does, we've worked in tourism for many years, but essentially what we do most of the time for our clients is help them think through their market, their customer, and their brand strategy. So really at the heart of what we do is how to win in your chosen marketplaces is what we do. And as I alluded to, we do a lot of work in tourism, and I guess what's particularly relevant in terms of this conversation is that we authored the domestic tourism strategy. So we worked in partnership with TNI and the task force, the steering group that was put in place to work through the domestic. Very quickly, you'll probably know the background to that. Is in effect, from Northern Ireland's perspective, a lot of work had been done on understanding the international markets, which was up until recently a high growth kind of source markets of source. And there also had been a significant amount of work done in the Republic of Ireland market, as that was also a key market that could actually drive growth and generate revenue and volume and all the things we want to do. But the last leg to the stool was really getting a good understanding and a deep understanding of the domestic market. So we undertook a project to really build that understanding, understand what's going on, what's working, what's not working, but critically try and define what are the actions or changes that need to happen in the future in order to really ensure that the domestic market is buoyant. And at the time, pre-COVID-19, there was a broad acknowledgement that actually, the domestic market is a very important baseline and foundation of the industry and of the sector. So it's sizable in terms of its volume, and it's sizable in terms of revenue. And as I say, it also has key dimensions in terms of seasonal distribution and regional distribution. But really, for a prosperous sector in the round, in normal times, there really is a requirement to have a very healthy domestic sector, and hence the focus on that. Now, obviously, as we've journeyed through the last through 2020, really and probably into for a good part of 2021, the domestic market is going to be extremely high in its importance. In that it is one of the markets that's going to be available, one of the few markets that's going to be available to us. Although the international markets will obviously come back in time. So at least in the near and the medium term, it's very important. So hopefully the perspectives we brought last time, and the perspectives we can bring this morning are going to be very useful to you in terms of thinking about, in this particular dimension, development and delivery for domestic markets. So that's where we're going to focus today. So that's some of the background, really. So a recap of the first webinar. I think it's available now anyway to access if you weren't, and if you were, what we covered was a really an overview of the market generally from a domestic point of view, plus the current context. So we were lucky enough to have some recent research in the context of COVID-19 to understand customer sentiments. We looked at that. We also looked at the overview of the strategy for growth of the domestic market, and we're going to go into a particular dimension of experience development in a lot more detail today, but we looked at it more broadly, and perhaps most importantly, we looked in some detail around a bit the domestic segmentation strategy. So really understanding the range of segments that are available that exist in the market, and understanding those that we believe we should prioritize, trying to understand who they are, what their motivations are, what their behaviors are, in the belief that really an intimate understanding of the consumer and the visitor can help us to strategize, but also perhaps more importantly, implement and take actions that can lead to a good domestic market and revenue delivery and revenue growth, and also drive margin and all the other things that we would like to do within our respective businesses. So that's what we touched on. And we're shifting gears today in that we're zoning in particular on experience development. I think next week we're going to be talking about communications, but at the heart of all this lies experiences. So in our communications and our experiences aren't at the quality need to be, well then we're going to have a problem. But if we go the other side of the equation, if we are successful in our communications and attracting domestic visitors and the experiences are outstanding, well then we have a really heightened chance of repeat visitation and also word of mouth, which we know is a key driver, certainly on a domestic basis, if not across all markets. So we're going to be talking about the strategy in the context of experience development. What are the key things that, from a domestic market point of view, it needs to be considered, done, and acted upon. Then we're going to touch on the priority segments, so going back into the consumer lens and have a look at what are they looking for from the experience and experience development point of view. So there's some general kind of rule of thumbs in terms of strategic effort, but then there's, depending on the segments we're most interested in, there are really strong signposts for what they want, what they need, that can then inform our efforts. So I'm going to bring you through that first half of the webinar, and then George from TNI is going to take over and talk about a couple of dimensions, talk about experience and development in the context of the Embrace the Giant Spirit brand, talk about the various supports or the dimensions of expertise that are available that can support businesses, and also talk about the development supports. And I think Karen will touch on some of the local council-led supports that are there as well, and that's critically important. So we want to know what we're going to do strategically. We want to know what our segments want. We want to know how to be coherent and complementary to the overarching experience brand. We want to know what expertise is available to us to support us, and we want to know what supports are available to support us. So if we really determine and are very good in our decision making around about what actions we'll take from an experience development point of view, we can act decisively, avail of the appropriate supports, and hopefully do it in a very consistent way that's authentic to your particular offering and your destination, but also is complementary to the broader experience brands. That's how it's hopefully all going to knit together. And then at the back end, we'll create some time for some questions, some discussions, some comments, which I think worked relatively well the last day. Okay, so very quickly, we're going for growth, and I'd say these figures need to be revised at least for the horizon of the next 24 months. So, this was a 10-year scale of ambition, driving, 24% growth in trips and 31% growth in spend. I'd say those figures would be actually, if we can get going, dwarfed from a domestic point of view, but we are pursuing growth. And I think the important things around about that is we will be always of the view that once you're pursuing growth, you have to consider change. In our experience, sometimes business as usual can drive growth, but more often than not, accelerated growth is driven by change. Sometimes small change, sometimes large change. But certainly to really drive sustainable growth, what we'd say is we need to be continually looking at evolving, tweaking, managing our experiences from a very, very small forensic level are really kind of big ticket, big noticeable experience dimensions. So that's just in growth mode, we've got to be really looking at experience and always seeking for improvement within that. Okay. And the other thing is just to go back over it as well is that the priority segments we're going to be looking at later. There are 6 segments in the market, but the 3 segments that were prioritized are natural quality seekers, and we'll touch on them, the aspiring families and the social Instagrammers. And as you can obviously see, they, when you combine them up, they represent a very significant, well over half of the market. And what we'd say is, from an experience development point of view, is that if we improve our experience offering for these segments, then by default, we'll improve experience for all segments. So all improvements, even though they might be focused on a priority segment, actually apply to all segments. So just getting better is getting better. Improving experiences is improving experiences. So I just think that's one thing that's kind of worth bearing in mind. So the strategy itself consists of kind of 4 distinct parts, and it's about being really effective in our communications, which we'll be talking about next week. Really developing very compelling experiences, attractions at events, which you're going to touch on today. There's a piece around about industry and stakeholder engagement, which is actually what we're doing today in part, but really having an industry that is working together, collaborating together. And then there's a dimension of citizens and community engagement, and this is more of a grassroots, on the ground, engaging people of a place to really be proud of their particular place and be involved in the tourism activities, be promoting tourism activities, whether through word of mouth, whatever, I'd be contributing to them. So the more that residents in a particular area will feel very positive about their area, then the more they're likely they are to contribute to the overall tourism effort, and indeed the more authentic it'll be in terms of its delivery. But today we're headed into the top right box in terms of experience, so that's where we're absolutely going to center ourselves this morning. So I guess without further ado, what I'm kind of eager to do is to talk about what is the strategic intent. And I think there's about 5 or 6 key thrusts here, and you look at them and hear about them may be more important to you than others. So I guess that's one thing I'd ask you to reflect for your own business, where it's at and where you want to get it to. What is really, really important within here, and what is the strategic kind of guidelines actually suggesting that we do, and then maybe reflect on, you know, what is it that we can be unique, but it is very important. And the overarching objective is to build out and improve new and existing terms, experiences, attractions, and events for the domestic market. Now that just might sound like, but the thing is here is that the end qualifiers for the domestic market is really, really important. So that would therefore tell us that what we've got to do is we can't do that without an understanding of the domestic market. And if we go back to some of the broad demographics, we know we've an aging population. And that doesn't mean that we have to, you know, change our experiences to suit like very elderly people, but it does mean we need to understand what the landscape is going to look like. Maybe it could mean an escalation of high octane activities, but it also might mean that we have older consumers who are potentially more affluent and potentially have more time on their hands. So it could mean understanding that really, really well. And what does that mean in the context of our existing experiences, our new experiences, the attractions that we have, and the events that we might run, and how they're run, and how they actually manifest. Now, we're not implementing or executing very many events now, but we will be in the future. So that's worth consideration. Okay. So what are the key initiatives? So the first thing to say is, and I kind of alluded to there, one of the big things we need to do is consider the domestic market in our product and our experience development strategy. So when we're looking at products and experiences and innovations, we really need to center ourselves in what the key segments, interests, and motivations are. So we'll be going through that in a little bit of detail this morning, and we're probably going to learn about it more as we go on. But I think it's very interesting to reflect on the segments. And I think from a industry point of view, I think we'd be advocating for almost kind of live learning. So when you do, and you will see segments in your whether it be your accommodations or at your experiences, there is an opportunity to engage with them and understand what's working for them, what's not working for them, and think about that in the context of any experience development or investment. And as I alluded to as well, is a real need to, you know, in the longer term, take a view on the aging profile of the domestic market, understand it, and determine how we're going to respond to it. Okay. The other thing that really arose when we looked at it is just more through the qualitative research that we did with the priority segments, is that there is a requirement to really review the family offering, family segment, and benchmark it versus competitors. So one of the things that we learned was that a key competitor, and indeed a key source market in the Republic of Ireland, was viewed very positively in terms of the overall family offering. And it was probably attracting quite a number of Northern Ireland residents into the Republic of Ireland with the family proposition. Now, when we worked with consumers, they actually felt that potentially one of the areas that needed significant development from Northern Ireland's point of view was its family offering. So there was a sense that it wasn't as connected or as deep or as rich as that could be offered within the Republic of Ireland. Now, our sense would be that's more about putting the experience in a cohesive way together rather than a lack of assets or experiences or so on and so forth. But really, if you're sitting on the other side of the screen now and the family segment is really, really important to you, all of our learnings in the work that we did, the review and the strategy development is that, you know, everyone needs to take a good look at the overall family proposition and determine, is it as good as it needs to be? And really look at it on benchmarking and a competitive basis, see what's available, research it, have a look online at what's available in the Republic of Ireland, say, are we matching that? Have we got parity? And where do we have superiority? And where we can find superiority, really drive that out, really build upon that. Because as of now, it isn't necessarily seen as a particular strategic strength in the round. Now, within the Fermanagh District Council region, there may be fantastic family propositions and experiences. We didn't look at that forensically, but it begs the question about how good is our offering to the family segment, and what can we do in order to improve it, and what can we do to really make sure it is perceived as being superior, better, or different to what's offered within the nearest competitor market within the Republic of Ireland. The second area that arose was the requirement for the development and promotion of propositions. also known as itineraries to a certain extent. But one of the big dimensions in the domestic market, as you will be aware, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, is the day tripper volume of day trippers, because of the small geography, people are clear that they can go from one place, experience it, and come back and go back to their own home in that evening or that night. But there is a big opportunity to actually drive conversion of day trippers into at least one overnight. And that's going to be led through the development of a range of what are putting together of 36-hour propositions. So from a consumer point of view, what does the day look like? What does the night look like? And what does the next day look like? And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. So that needs to be developed. Now, what's in this is that from an experience point of view, you might have a hero dimension, and maybe that happens during the day, or maybe it happens during the night, or maybe it's a morning thing. But from a consumer's point of view, if they're going to make the effort to go and experience that hero experience, what is it surrounded by? What's my first part of my day like? What's my middle part? What's my evening like? And what is the next day like? Because the next day isn't always just about getting out of bed, having a bowl of cornflakes and driving home. There may be more to it. So there is a requirement here to really give deep thought as to what an amazing 36 hours might look like for a consumer or a chosen segment, and then really see how we can put it in place. And this obviously needs to be underpinned by a keen price and value for money equation. We might have a very evocative 30 position, but we need to think about the functional and practical dimensions of it. What is the cost value relationship within that? So this is about packaging things up in a very compelling way, but also having a keen price. And what this may call for is strong collaboration. So to deliver the perfect 36 hours, it may not be all within your control. So there's an encouragement here of a collaboration between accommodation providers, event owners, food and drink establishments, experience owners. And really the mindset has to be a we, not a me approach. So we talked about this the last time around, about the desire to really get the consumer, get the visitor, and hold on to them. But actually, if we're going to really pursue really great holistic experiences, there may be a requirement to get hold of them, but also let go of them a bit and make sure that they have a fantastic experience within the area. And then they're keen to come back again and again and again. So that kind of 36-hour proposition piece or itinerary or whatever it might be needs to be packaged. And the piece is here, if we're pursuing a particular segment, is what does a brilliant 36 hours look like for them, and really put that in place. Okay. Building on this, and it's kind of in contrast with the last point, is a day tripper value strategy. So, I mean, I'm working in tourism for many, many years, and on a domestic basis, day trippers have to a certain extent been a source of frustration, in that, we wish they come, they don't spend a whole load of money, and they go, and we don't get an overnight, and it just isn't great, and they congest the place up, whatever it might be. But this is about really flipping that on its head and saying, okay, people are going to day trip, particularly within the domestic market, because it's feasible for them to do it. So the question becomes, how do we generate as much value from day trips as possible? So again, if someone's coming into, or a segment or visitors are coming in, but not staying overnight within the Fermanagh District Council region, what is it that we can do to maximize value throughout the day? So how do we deliver a great experience, but maximize spend while there? To attractions, to food, to retail, through all the offerings that can be there, to make sure that they part their money. So we don't get people journeying in, journeying out, clogging up destinations, but not spending a whole lot of money. There is a real economic need here to extract value for day trippers. So we would be encouraging you guys to think about, if someone is going to come into the region for a day or the area for a day, what can they do? But critically, if they're doing them, how do we extract value? But also simultaneously enhance their overall experience. And obviously food and retail and all these things are key dimensions of that. So that needs to be considered, because they will continue to come, and hopefully we will have success in converting them over into overnight stays. But I think the other thing as well is, if a day tripper has a fantastic day, there's a much higher propensity they'll go for a fantastic weekend the next time. So again, this by focusing on day trippers and really delivering for them, it actually probably has a likelihood of leading to greater conversion in terms of overnight experiences, where there can be even more additional and probably more substantive value created and revenue generated. Okay. The fourth area is hugely important, and you'll see this when we go into the segments, is to continue to develop and promote Northern Ireland's food and drink offering. So one of the real strengths from a domestic point of view is that it's very, very strong recognition of the this dramatic improvement of the food and drink offering within Northern Ireland, and the fact that it is really thriving now. It's high quality, very, very good stuff. It's diverse, and also from a regional point of view, it can be very strong. So there's always within regions, within areas, there's very noteworthy food establishment, food offerings, and they don't always necessarily need to be high end, but they're just seen to be quality and part of the experience. So food and drink is really, really important. And as I kind of alluded to the last time we were together, it has become a proxy for the overall quality of a tourism experience. So if an area is seen to have great food and drink offering, then it's seen to actually be a good tourism destination. And if you go the other side of the coin, if someone's renowned for having really poor or terrible food and drink offering, well, then its tourism proposition is fundamentally weakened. So more specifically, what the effort needs to be around here is evolving the perception of what food and drink means within offering meals within Northern Ireland, because probably at the forefront of it now is it's best known for quality restaurants for evening meals. Okay, that's that's the centerpiece of what we learned. But actually, from a consumer point of view, they need a multiplicity of really good food propositions. So that evening meal in the high-end restaurant is great, but what about casual dining? What about food innovations, gastropubs, cafes, premium delis, international cuisine, all these sorts of things? Really, really important. So I guess the question is, within your region, how can we dial this up? How can we really make sure that the food experience is outstanding? It is diverse, it meets different price points, it delivers at different times during the day, but it's wrapped into the broader experience as well. So if you go back to the itineraries or 36 hours, food's a big dimension within that, and this is a theme that'll keep on coming up as well. So really, from an experience point of view, from every single, I guess, operator and establishment point of view, they need to think about either what they're delivering, or if they're not delivering food and drink, what's proximate to them that's good, that can be part of or at least adjacent to the experiences that they're delivering. And obviously for accommodation providers, this is critical as well. So from experience point of view, that is hugely important. And in some ways, a really good food offering can sometimes be a draw on its own to a certain extent. And certainly when you go into the look at the segments in terms of what motivates them, that hits the top of the list in many, many occasions. Okay. Building on that, there's a big need for, and this is potentially a little bit more urban led, but there is a need for development of a breakfast brunch culture and seen as a priority. So what we learned from working with the segments when we did the qualitative work was that too often the next day was a quick breakfast and gone. And there wasn't enough of a really brilliant experience, whereas certainly within the Republic of Ireland market, the breakfast experience or the brunch experience is an extension and the end often of a stay, but seen as very, very, very good. So currently the next day food offering, whether it be in accommodation setting or whether it be in a town or a village, whatever it might be, isn't seen as a particular strength, and it needs development. Because if you're a day tripper and you believe that really you're going to have you're going to go to bed, go to sleep, and then you're going to get out of there, that is, you're going to go, well, will I stay over? But if you have the belief that, I'll have a really nice evening, I'll have a really good rest at night, I can get up the next day and I can have a really fantastic breakfast, or I can stick around to have a really nice brunch, a light breakfast and a really nice brunch, and then I go back home in the afternoon. Well, it feels like a more holistic and a more complete experience and a more valued experience. So there's a big need to do that. The other piece here is, and this may be actually, ironically, maybe more particularly prevalent in the near term, is the development of markets or street foods, either on a temporary or permanent basis, is seen as something that could be a real opportunity. So again, I guess in the times that we're going to be living in for the foreseeable future, outdoor access to food, markets, street food, farmers markets, all these sorts of things is really important and has the capacity to draw people in. And these are the sorts of things that again can be brought into that 36-hour or that longer experience that gets people to stay overnight. So again, that food dimension needs development in terms of thinking through. So again, there may be great things already going on in your region that you can highlight and dial up. There may be additions, there may be new things, there may be incremental things to be done, but I suspect that there are things to be done that can improve the overall offering, but simultaneously generate value and revenue for the industry. Okay. The fifth area is the development of the nighttime economy. So again, it's somewhat rooted in urban, but not restricted to urban at all, to be honest with you. So again, for the majority of residents, day trips are a viable alternative to overnight stays. And therefore, we have to have enough to encourage residents to stay overnight. So The general sentiment and view is that the nighttime proposition within Northern Ireland is not as good as it could be, or is not as great as it could be, and therefore whether that's true or not is not the point. You know, people's perception is their reality, so there needs to be a greater emphasis on what to do at night. So it has to be effectively communicated, but critically, it has to be there in its own substance. So what is the evening experience, whether it be food, whether it be a drink, whether it be experience, whatever it might be? What is that nighttime economy, nighttime experience look like? And that doesn't necessarily need to be restricted to food and drink and pubs and all this sort of stuff. You know, there's all sorts of dimensions, certainly within the natural environment, that may be considered within that as well. So again, overall nighttime economy, nighttime experience offering is very, very important, all with the orientation of really making sure that we can get overnight trips in the domestic market and all the benefits that arise from those, both for the consumer and obviously for industry as well. So that's an area. I think the last area is really pragmatic and down to earth, but hugely important. And that's about how we develop the infrastructure, how we develop those key facilities, and what policy looks like. So again, this is about key tourism stakeholders collaborating with local councillors to ensure that, you know, investments are guided towards, you know, really building the fabric of local communities. So really good public spaces, how they're improved, really good amenities, parking, toilets, all these sorts of really good infrastructure and broadband. These things really add up in terms of the experience for people when they actually are taking breaks. And also, you know, having really good amenities, really good public spaces is a really strong signpost for the quality of the tourism offering in a particular area. So everything down to literature, to street lighting, all these sorts of things are important. And I think the really positive thing here is it improves the location for the community, but also for the visitor. So the other piece here is slightly more political dimension is that how key stakeholders, including yourselves, might lobby or contribute to make sure that we drive tourism-friendly planning policy and licensing laws. So it'd be pub opening hours, street trading, weekend retail trading times, the ability to have outdoor food markets, all these sorts of things. So there's one thing having the intent to develop and put in place experiences that consumers want. There is another thing having the conditions in which you can do that. So again, it's about taking an active part in collaboration with tourism and local council bodies and local councils to say, is there things that we can do from a planning or licensing law perspective that can really create the platform upon which we can really, really deliver for the domestic market? So that has to be considered. Okay. So they're the key 6 strands that run through the overall strategy. Hopefully some of it kind of landed and resonate with you, and you can start to trigger you as to some of the things you might be able to do or think about doing. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to move into understanding the priority segments in the context of experiences. So the first thing to say, and we shared this the last day, is that if you look at, you know, what people are interested in and why they'll travel, they're largely, they are the same. Okay, but here you see the point around about eating and drinking and the importance of it. Okay, so that goes back to a couple of the points that we raised already. But if you skip over shopping, which may be mitigated against in the near term, all the other dimensions are an interest and reason to travel exists in the context of outdoors and experiences. Okay, and the other thing as well is that in more recent times, when we've done the consumer sentiment research work, you'll see the shifting away from people are really motivated by keeping their own safety in terms of their own health, but also outdoors is a solution to that, and outdoors being a priority. So again, our world in terms of experience development and delivery is shifting a wee bit, and actually it may be more favourable to the Fermanagh District Council region in terms of what it is able to do and what it is naturally positioned to do in terms of experience offering, in terms of the outdoors and natural environment. So again, that's in broad strokes what's really important. Okay. If we start to look at our segments, and we'll go through each of them, if you go into the natural quality seekers, obviously you can start to pick off things here from the broad terms that are important from an experience point of view. So accommodation, hugely important. Quality, so is that good enough? The outdoors and nature lovers, how are we delivering outdoor experiences? How are we what does that look like? Sustainability, how are we embedding sustainability as a key dimension of the experience offering, either as part of the experience or as a substantiation and a proof point of the experience? They're looking for gentle activities. What's range again? What is our walking proposition? maybe up to cycling, whatever it might be, what agenda. So there's loads of things here. When you look at the segments, you get very strong cues for what the experience might look like. Now, what we're going to do is go down a layer in each of the segments, and this is a bit of a clunky dashboard that is available for each segment. But if we look at our natural quality seekers in more detail, and you go to you probably maybe see it on the screen, the bottom left-hand side, what they're looking for is they're interested in natural environment, houses, castles and gardens, coastal touring and beaches, and wildlife and nature. So it then becomes in terms of what have we got available, what can we promote, what can we organise in our experiences that respond to why they want to travel. Because naturally, the more that you put these things in front of them from an experience point of view, the greater your likelihood of influencing them. And again, if you look at the top right and some of their key motivations, two of the top three motivations has outstanding natural scenic attractions. So again, what can we do there? And we'll probably have a lot of assets within your region to respond to that. And then another key motivation is the natural environment is respected and protected. So again, what are we doing here explicitly, and how are we communicating, and how are we delivering an experience that talk to the environment, talk to sustainability, and all those key dimensions associated with tourism. So we can start to look around the segments and understand what's going on for them and how it relates to the overall experience. If we look at inspiring families, again, some obvious signposts in here: strong family focus, and therefore they need activities to suit the children and all the family. So again, thinking about this particular segment and going back to one of the points that we discussed earlier, how good is our family proposition? How well suited and configured it is for the entire family and not just the kid or not just the child? Because if you recall from the last time we're together, for this segment, it is about those shared experiences that build memories, build bonds, build connectivity between families. So activities, but generally speaking, activities and experiences are very important to this particular segment. So if you drop down in here, you'll see that in terms of going to the bottom left, again, number one, eating and drinking. So again, food and drink experience, hugely important. And then if you take shopping in that equation, what we've got is the natural environment, wildlife and nature, coastal touring and beaches. And again, if you hop into the other area in terms of motivations, we see food coming through really, really importantly again. Natural scenic attractions coming through really important again, and some reference to the over-index relative to, they're not strong on this per se in relative terms, but they do over-index on energetic activities as well. So again, the broadness of the experiences for the family is very, very important, because I think the thing we learned in the qualitative work we did with this particular segment is that although in principle, when a family goes on holiday, the parents are they are the parents, that is their role, and that's how they perceive themselves. But there are certain dimensions and parts of the day where they want to see themselves as adults and individuals. And that might be about food, it might be about drink, it might be about one of the parents doing something they're interested in, whether it be mountain biking or getting out into nature by themselves. So oftentimes in a weekend stay for a family, there is a moment or two that's carved out specifically for one of the parents. So that a range of experiences might attract to them, but it also might be something like spa, whatever it might be, needs to be considered as well in terms of overall experience. Going on to the last segment, the social Instagrammers, what we see here again, now these are stronger orientated towards urban settings, the pubs and nightlife and buzz and atmosphere, but they are very open-minded about the experiences and doing different sorts of things. And I guess as their world has constricted and confined, I think it'd be a limiting assumption to think that, the region that you guys are in can't really play and win in this particular area. But you will not play and win unless you can convince the segment that you have a variety of interesting, unique and differentiated experiences. And some of that will revolve around food and drink, but it will do other things as well. Because one of the key dimensions here is that they'd rather spend, while accommodation is important, they'd rather spend money on what they're doing during the day rather than the bed they're sleeping in during the night. And therefore, really good experiences and a kind of good portfolio and offering to them that can really keep these people interested and really give them an enjoyable time is very, very important within that. But again, if we look here, again, food becomes so important. But there are some other little signposts here as well. Music festivals may not be in the horizon for the near term, but very interested. The first instance of spas, so they're younger, but they do like to treat themselves, and then coastal touring and beaches. And again, if we look at other dimensions, very, very, very strong in food. So you can start to think about, really what can I potentially put in place for this particular segment that might have resonance with them. But also, how do I configure my offer that I overlay my accommodation proposition or offering and cost and price that is attached to that, and what I'm offering during the day in terms of giving them a variety of experiences, and also a little bit of serendipity in terms of discovering things as they go along. Very, very important within that. And certainly, I think I don't have a depth of knowledge of it, but in terms of the experience, infrastructure, and propositions that are available in the region, it can be configured in a way that's very interesting and motivating to this particular segment. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. I'm going to pass over to George now. I'm on screen, so I can't see if any questions have hopped up yet, and I'll keep driving the screen, but I look forward to kind of checking in with you towards the back end of the session, so we can touch on those sorts of things. Is that okay?
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Connor.
Okay. So I'll click on as you want me to, George. So you just give me
Thanks
the
so
nod.
much. Hi, everybody. A number of you might be aware of who I am. My name is George Diamandis. I work in the experience development team at Tourism Northern Ireland, specifically under the new brand, which was launched at the end of last year. So there are a number of us in the team. We each look after various council regions, of which Fermanagh falls under my remit. So next slide there, please, Connor. So many of you will know we launched Embrace the Giant Spirit at the end of last year. Now, this was a program or a project that took quite a lot of consultation to get together. We realized we lacked an identity on the island when we went out into the international market. The overseas trade, the overseas operators were well aware of the Wild Atlantic Way and Dublin and the island's ancient east, but Northern Ireland just didn't have this identity. We seemed very fragmented and disjointed, so we really needed that overarching brand that we could take up. And from our research, and experience brand really was what we needed and what the demand from the market was. So Embrace the Giant Spirit will be a 10-year journey for us. The vision was to generate a £2 billion of annual spend in the tourism sector and to create 25,000 jobs by 2030. Now, 2020 has obviously thrown a large spanner in the works. So next slide there, please, Connor. But if you look at the amount of rollout that had actually taken place before the lockdown had started, we're pretty lucky with our placing. We only launched the brand at World Travel Market at the end of last year, so be aware 23 brand demonstrators came along with us to animate the brand when we launched it to the international trade. And then we launched it to the local industry in December. So we had a local launch in Belfast, and then our road shows took place right before the lockdown. Next slide. So if you consider the timing of that, it could have been a lot worse. If we were a year or two, or if we completed the full year of the rollout internationally, we had plans throughout all the international trade shows throughout the year. It really wasn't the worst timing for us. Looking at how things have changed over the last 12 months, we're seeing that the demands that are emerging from market really do align with what we offer in Northern Ireland and also what the brand stands for. There seems to be a lot of talk around sustainable and meaningful type experiences. The MICE market are wanting to try incorporate social responsibility in terms of their trips. And when the trade returns, we know that they're going to be smaller groups, but we want to encourage them to stay longer and take part in more meaningful type experiences. Now, that could be a CSR type experience where you get your hands dirty in a litter picking or a seal release down an Explorers or whatever it might be. But more so, it's connecting with nature, taking that time out from a spiritual aspect, from a stress aspect, and we're really well placed for that. So our emphasis is really going to not so much change the offering we have. It's really about the wording and how we promote that. The demand seems to be for the smaller sustainable type businesses with a low footprint. They recruit locally. It's a family-owned business. The supply chains are local, and that's what we have in abundance here. So the trends that we're seeing emerge are very very much aligned to what we're looking at achieving under the new brand. Next slide. So I mentioned I'm in the product and experience development team. So there's a number of us within our team that some specifically look after the brand and others that fall under more the overarching sectoral remit. Next slide. So in the experience development team, there are 3 of us. We specifically look after the brand aligned experiences. Now, there is a criteria to become a brand aligned experience, but ultimately this is something that is available for everybody to partake in. The brand is underpinned by 4 pillars. The first is it has to be original and authentic to Northern Ireland. So it needs to be something that you can't do anywhere else. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that a fishing experience would not fall under the brand. It needs to connect to the sense of place. So if you think of the lock in Fermanagh, there's enormous amount of opportunity there to develop things on the water that especially line in with what we're seeing for the demand in the more outdoor type experiences. The second is it needs to connect to the landscape, so the land, the sea, and the water. The third, it needs to have the big welcome, and it needs to have an interaction with the local person. So it needs to be a guided experience. We need to have a local person either connecting with where they're going to connect to the history, or to take them to a sense of place. So it could be the local providence, it could be something that, you know, a stately home where you can get to meet the owners and get to see something that's sort of under the hood. The demand from the market is, and before COVID, was people weren't really wanting to get on the coach, have a whistle-stop tour of the main attractions, take your photos and leave. People are wanting to really get under the skin of what the experience, of what the destination has to offer that they're going to go visit, and that for us is what's so important under the brand. We have a set development process, and I'll talk about that in a little more detail shortly. And then within the brand development offices, the three of us, and we each look after a number of different council regions. So that's important because we ensure that there is a good regional spread of experiences throughout Northern Ireland, and there's a lot of shared learning. So we can see what other council regions are doing and which is successful that we can implement in other regions, and we can then share ideas as well. Then our sectoral offices, they look over the more strategic development. So there's three different sectors. There's food and drink, which Connor's mentioned, obviously very keen. So many of you will be aware of Gary Quate in our team. So he'll look after the experiences themselves, he'll be a point of contact, but then also the bigger programs like the Taste the Island and the Year of Food and Drink, which is hosted which we held a couple of years ago. We also have an outdoor and landscape officer and a culture and heritage. So the broader ask, if your experience or your business doesn't necessarily fit in or want to work within the brand, there is still the product development support that we're able to offer within our team. Next slide. So the experience development process, which I mentioned for brand aligned experience, follows 5 stages. Next slide. So the first stage we consider just a new lead. So this could be a business that we might not necessarily have worked with before, and we just ask them to submit a template, and that just covers the essence of what the experience is. Do you currently operate? What are your capacities? What the experience is about, and how importantly do you connect to the pillars which we expect to under the brand. Once we've scored it, happy that it meets the criteria, you then move to stage 2, which is the experience development stage. Now, this is when we'll get out on site, have a look at what you offer, and really help make sure that the experience is up to the standard of what we want to deliver under the brand, and more importantly, up to the standard of what the visitor would like to experience from an experience in Northern Ireland. Once we're happy with the delivery of the experience, you move through to stage 3. Now, we're piloting in the new year a module section for this. Now, we've identified that there's a number of key areas which businesses either need to be proficient in or need support in. Now, this will be pricing and finance. It will be digital marketing and your online presence and your website. It's your trade and sales platforms and your FAMs and media visits. So there'll be a number of different modules which will sit in. It will be a mentored program which you'll get specific mentors along, just to make sure that you're up the standard of what is required from the international visitor and the market itself. Once that stage is complete, you then move through to stage 4, which is the product launch phase. So this then falls back on the team. It's more just collecting the necessary content we need to get you listed on the website. We'll be able to book you in for photographer, so we'll have content generated under the new brand so that we have a consistent look and feel throughout the website and our digital channels. There'll be a digital shout out from the Tourism Northern Ireland media team. And then there's industry support as well, or industry activity. So we do a product update with Tourism Ireland once a month, and we'll invite 3 experiences each month to speak to the various international officers from Tourism Ireland who represent us in market. And then stage 5 is the account management. So if you look at Barry from Lockwood Water Taxis, he came along to World Travel Market. He's been through the process, and he's up to the standard of what we expect. And it's just ongoing account management. So ongoing support, making sure that we evolve and adjust to how the market needs change, but just to make sure that you maintain that standard. Next slide. So I want to talk about two quick experiences just to give you a bit of a case study on what these might look like. The first one, next slide, is our very own Barry from Locker and Water Taxis. So you'll be aware Barry came with us to World Travel Market at the end of last year as one of our brand demonstrators. When we launched the brand, we asked for submissions from the various experiences throughout Northern Ireland, and we looked for the ones that really captured the essence of what we're trying to achieve under the brand. Barry, well established in his own right, fitted that requirement, and he came along. There was obviously the support help get up to the standard at the trade that we needed, but he's a small business. He's independently operated. It goes to show it's not necessarily just for established businesses or those that have a big budget or big backing behind them. Next slide. The second experience is Bakehouse NI. Now, Brona Duffin, who's based up in Mid-Ulster, she was a nurse until a couple of years ago and wanted to have a change in career and follow a passion into cooking. And she literally is working from her kitchen, delivering cookery and local food making classes. So we've engaged with her with little or no tourism experience at all, and it's from educating from the very beginning, from understanding what the market segments are, how to approach travel shows, how to best market your business, and to align with the brand to maximize your exposure and to deliver a product that ultimately the business is looking to achieve. And she's been very successful in that in the last 12 months. If you look at the majority of the experiences that we work with, the majority are independent, small-run businesses. So this is not a program just for the Titanics and the Giant's Causeway. We're really wanting to develop a regional spread throughout Northern Ireland. And as the trends emerge post-COVID, it's the small independent operators which are really being sought after by the market. Next slide. So there is a broader avenue of support throughout the rest of tourism in Northern Ireland outside of the product development team. And Karen will also touch on the local support from the council. So it's important to realize that there is your council support as well. We'll work very closely with each other, so you won't miss out on opportunities from which either business or whichever board are offering. But it's important to note that there's two avenues of support there for you. Next slide. So our business solutions team at TNI are the business-to-business section of what we do. So they focus on two key areas. So it's MICE, which is meetings, incentive, conference, and exhibitions. So that's the bigger the bigger business side of tourism, the business tourism side, and then the international travel trade. So the business solutions team will be coordinating our attendance at travel shows across the world. They will liaise with the different regions to make sure that the experiences that we're promoting in any particular market align to that market, and make sure that we're going forward with our best foot forward to make sure that we promote Northern Ireland in the most effective way. So the business solutions team will really be important in terms of once you've got your business developed and understanding how to get in front of the customer. They will help mentor their programs that they'll run to help develop in certain areas. So be it an incentive workshop, maybe Ultralux or the sustainability type workshops that are looking at coming up in the future, they'll be very key to that. Next slide. We also have an industry development department, which easily to get confused with the product development. Industry development looks at programs on the whole. So you'll be aware of the TED program, so the Tourism Enterprise Development Program, which has been run at the moment. So these have been moved online. Before COVID, this was a year of face-to-face or in-person workshops throughout the country. But these are looking at key areas which you really need to develop. So, for example, food and drink. We can get experts and consultants and can really help us look at what areas of a business need to improve and what are the steps needing to be taken to achieve that. So there'll be programs run throughout the year, and these will adapt and change depending on where the real demand is from the market in terms of what support is needed, and also from where the demand comes from as well. Next slide. Many of you will be aware of the 2 funding programs that we were run this year already. The first was the Experience Development Fund, and the second was the Website Development Program. So depending on budget on an annual basis, we will have the opportunity to run capital funding grants. These will vary from year to year, and we really look at where the demand is and where the weaknesses are in terms of our industry and how we can promote that. It's a fantastic opportunity for you to always keep your eye out. The Experience Development Fund, I know a number of businesses in Fermanagh are successful, and that's been really important to help really make some large investments into certain areas that you might not necessarily have the cash flow to do, but those areas of the business which really needed that support. And then lastly, the marketing and the digital slides. So next slide, please. So our marketing team run 2 annual campaigns in Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland each year. So they will promote individual experiences. The campaigns will be varied depending on certain regions, and they are coordinated by our media agency, BBDO. So this is really to try drive the footfall from both the domestic and the Republic of Ireland market. And these have both been really key, especially if you look at how the landscape's changed post-COVID. They will coordinate the online offers that get promoted out, and then they ran the Cooperative Marketing Fund this year. So there was a fund available to market your business in the Republic of Ireland, and the funding was channeled in through Tourism Northern Ireland and for your business to avail of. We also have the digital team, which will be promoting Northern Ireland on our digital channels. And it is so important to always share your content, especially at the moment where there's not much happening. It really is a challenge for the team to get, new and uplifting content to keep Northern Ireland in the public mind, to keep visitors aware of that we're here as a region and that we're still waiting to welcome them back when they return. So always make the effort of getting the content together, be it, autumn walks, now coming up to Christmas, get your Christmas content. And it's a great opportunity to promote your business on a platform that already has a very significant following. The digital marketing team also coordinate the media fams, so we'll have media visits coming in throughout the year on a sort of a sporadic basis when they do come through, and depending on the ask from the media teams, they'll be out to the specific regions or promoting specific type of experiences. So for the brand aligned experiences, they will be briefed on how to manage and how to present yourselves to the media teams, and the digital marketing team will be there to help. Now, one team I haven't mentioned in the presentation here is the quality and standards team. So for the accommodation providers, you'll be very familiar with the quality and standards. Now, they provide the Tourism Northern Ireland quality rating. So it's a grading system of 1 to 5 stars. Now, it is looking at changing for the experiences because, experiences can be subjective. You can't compare or you can't grade an experience in the same way you do an accommodation. For example, toilet facilities or the likes. You need to really have a different type of grading, which has been looked at the moment. So experiences will be either graded or accredited by the tourist board, but maybe in a slightly different way. But the quality and standards team have a wealth of experience in terms of what the standard is required and in terms of best practice in the industry. So if you're ever having any challenges or looking for ideas, when you next have your visitor come out, have a chat to them and see what recommendations they can make. That they're a very useful source of experience there for you. Next slide. Now, an important thing as well to realize is that there is additional support from particularly Tourism Ireland and to a certain extent Vulture Island as well, especially based on the location of Fermanagh. Tourism Ireland will have avenue support, potentially falling under Ireland's hidden heartlands. So be aware of what activity Tourism Ireland are doing as well. The remit for Tourism Ireland is to promote the island of Ireland in their respective markets. So maintain your relationships with Tourism Ireland and be aware of their activity at the same time, because there's a good avenue to further promote your business outside of what we're doing in the domestic market at TNI. Thank you very much. If there are any particular questions in terms of experience development and the brand itself, or a further ask in terms of what support or various departments in Tourism Northern Ireland, I'm more than happy to help. Karen has my details and she'll be able to pass them on to you. And at any stage, reach out. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Karen, just got it back to you. just talk a little bit of local supports, then we'll move into Q&A or discussion.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you both for that. I suppose in local support, I mean, most of you are probably aware of this, but it's just to once again draw your attention to it. There's a broad spectrum of programs in business support, from the Go For It program, Kickstart, Advances in Business Growth, the digital support program. There's a whole remit there. So it might not say tourism on the tin, but it can support tourism businesses. They're there for any business. So, and that's one-to-one tailored mentoring for you and your business. So, really good support there as well. So, if it's relevant to anybody, please get in touch with us. The Tourism Excellence Programme, that is specific for tourism businesses. That's the mentors that we have on that programme have worked in the tourism industry for a number of years, and they're very clued into what is going on at a national level, and in terms of the what you need to be clued into in the domestic market strategy and things like that there. So, but again, that's from financial planning, organizational planning, maybe if you're looking at, things that you need to restructure or, think about changing due to the impact of COVID, digital marketing, lots of different things. So again, just contact us and we can align you with the right mentor to help you with whatever is needed there. Also, even I suppose under that program, sometimes people aren't aware, if you are submitting something like a funding application, or even, starting off the experience development process with TNI, for example, we can help you with that kind of early stage development. So lots of opportunities within the Tourism Excellence Programme. The Multimedia Support Programme is open at the moment and closes on the 11th of December. Now, that's a competitive programme, and that is for businesses to apply for video and photography for your business, whether it's your accommodation, your experience, whatever it is. So I say it is competitive, but it's open at the moment and closes on the 11th of December. But for that and much more, please visit www.fermanaoma.com. The details are there to register your interest in any of that support. And as always, you have my details as well. So I suppose, I don't see any questions in the chat box yet, but I suppose one thing I'd like to comment on that is that it's interesting that, I think for me, what I find is that all those indicators are there in terms of the domestic market, in terms of the impact of COVID, in terms of where we as a destination are positioned for what people want at the moment, in terms of the outdoors, in terms of getting away from it all. We have all that. And I think we maybe sometimes don't see what we have as an experience, whereas the visitor will. So, for example, like we're working with people at the moment around basket weaving. And again, that came from somebody stepped into their property and saw a picture on the wall of someone basket weaving, and they were outside of the district, and to them they were like, oh my goodness, what is that? And that kind of developed into something. Again, us going out for a walk, up mountains and hills that, to us it's what we do every day, but to a visitor who's coming from a city or something, it's not what they do every day. So and even your last slide there, George, was the shepherd. And I mean, who would have thought that a guy going out, rounding up his sheep would have become this visitor experience that people are now paying to come and do. So I think, what we maybe take for granted as our everyday, but sure, you can do that whenever you want. For the visitor, it's not necessarily that. Anyway, that's my tuppence worth, and I'll open the floor now to anybody who has any questions.
Just to add on to what Karen's saying there, it's not only just taking for granted what you have here, it's also your confidence in what you have to offer. A lot of people might think it's not that great, who would want to see it, and I can tell you as a foreigner who lives in Northern Ireland, there is the quality of what we have here is superb, and you'll be surprised, especially a lot of the new experiences that are coming through. Brona, for example, these are people who are like, but why? No one would have any interest. And they've now been able to develop a business out of it. And you have to understand it from the eyes of the foreigner who come in. They have never met the people. They've never understood the landscape. They don't know the history. There is so much to offer here that is really that helps for a strong product. So it's your confidence as much as it is what you take for granted.
I don't know if anyone has any questions. If you want to put your hand up or put anything in the comment, or no. And thank you for Barry for unknowingly participating in the presentation.
I think we have a hand up.
Okay. Let me see. There's a question just being typed into the coming in at the moment. Whenever you're ready, you can unmute yourself there.
You can unmute, yeah, because we've a...
Rodolfo, whenever you're ready, you can unmute yourself if you want to just ask the question rather than typing it. It's up to you.
Okay, just Rodolfo here. Actually, from another foreigner living in Northern Ireland, it is quite difficult to see here the approach that we have towards tourism, especially here on the countryside here in Fermanagh. It is pretty much each independent working on its own instead of having like a community or maybe a certain approach of togetherness, because it is more individuals, owners trying to develop their own experience. Then instead they amalgamate and say, okay, let's see what we can do best for Loughearn, for instance. In Loughearn, we have it is half of the county, and you see it is really underdeveloped. You know, it's sad to see that I don't know, or maybe I don't know the amount of the experiences that we can have, because as I work in one of the resorts around here, and guests stop us and they ask, oh, what do we have to do and all this stuff. Like, you know a little bit, but you don't know all. There is no information. The information you have to kind of go and trying to find for yourself, instead of us could go to one place and say, hey, in here there is some information in there, and so on, so on. Sorry, do you guys kind of understand my point, or it's a bit confusing?
Yeah, thanks, Rodolfo. I suppose maybe it's just, you know, it is about product knowledge, and funny, we're doing a little bit about that. Certainly we have a couple of people from Fermanagh Lakeland Tourism on board, and that's definitely a really good resource in terms of knowing what product is within the district, both Fermanagh and the Omasparran side. Experiences, itineraries, there is a wealth of knowledge on there if you wanted to, you know, I suppose that's the first point maybe to familiarize yourself. But certainly there's a lot of new product coming up, and we have started this a series called Fam Trip Friday. Like everything, it's a virtual Fam Trip Friday at the moment, and that's where we're inviting different businesses within the tourism economy here to present themselves to the other businesses. And again, it's really about everyone getting to know each other, looking for the opportunities to collaborate, looking for opportunities to, you know, develop that 36-hour offer that Connor mentioned earlier, where, you know, that, as he rightly said, it's the we, not me, that, you know, you can only provide so much of a visitor experience, but if you work with, you know, Bill and Ben around you, that you can together and provide that experience. So Rodolfo, certainly I could invite you to that to participate in that Fam Trip Friday series, and you're welcome to do so to build that product knowledge.
Yeah, I just, there's a couple of things that strands there that kind of emerge that are interesting. I think worth highlighting, and go back to some of the stuff that George discussed as well. So I think Rodolfo's hit on there is you know, knowledge at a local level, which is going to be fundamental to, you know, being able to deliver or at least communicate holistic experiences. There's a couple of other important things, and obviously that then talks to the collaboration agenda, and that is touched on there around that kind of idea of, you know, yes, I want to be part of the visitor experience, but I don't need to necessarily own all of it, and how can I collaborate with industry peers and partners, whether it be food offerings or experience or attractions, to layer in my experience or my proposition with theirs, so it's a win-win. The other thing I'd add that probably is touched upon, particularly within the domestic market, and some of the stuff that Karen touched on, is that, and this is a really important point, the things that I would suspect this, let's just put this as a challenge to you, the things that you know well, okay, and think are interesting or valuable, but not necessarily unique, are to probably, for many people within the domestic market, what would be defined as hidden gems, okay? Because they don't know about them. And I think there is a serious amount of value in at least evaluating or thinking about the current offering and its capacity and propensity to be perceived as a hidden gem, particularly within your region. Because the moment you step up and say, hey, this is over here, you know, it actually can get a lot of traction. And people only know on a domestic basis, people only know what they know, okay? And they assume they know a lot, but in fact, they know a little. And the more regional you push the agenda, the less they know, okay? And there is, for all segments or just a consumer in the round, the idea of discovery, of being first to try something, doing something that's perceived to be unique and different, going off the beaten path, having an original experience is hugely valued, both for them and to a certain degree for their ability to, you know, position themselves through word of mouth and say to their friends or their colleagues, look, there's great things to be done, I've experienced them, I recommend you do. So there's a huge amount in that. So even if you were to think about your own experiences and what you got now and what you could potentially put in the point of view, and just imagine for a moment, they are hidden gems. They do have traction. They are not known. So pushing them out there and being proud about them. But I would say the caveat is the more you can do them, not in isolation, but alongside other really great experiences that people are looking for, is really good. Because people don't want just the experience. They want the experience plus the other experiences around it, whether it be engaging with a local, having a fantastic lunch, getting out on the water, whatever it might be. And the more we think about things in a more insular way, the more we're restricting the potency of our tourism offering to domestic market. And the more we think about our things imaginatively and have pride and are willing to puff out the chest and assert them as really great hidden gems that can be discovered within an hour's journey and so on and so forth, I think the more likelihood you have of success within the domestic market. So there's a bit here around about turning on the domestic market. The more important it becomes for the industry, the more emphasis it gets, I think the more traction that you can absolutely have. But there is the need for investment, there is a need for, you know, promotion, and there is a real need for collaboration. So it can really kind of deliver the returns that you're hoping it'll deliver.
Okay, thank you. But it is how I will put that into a question. You see quite a lot of the tourism development happen, like in the sorts of the Republic of Ireland. You see programs such as the Wild Atlantic Way, that it was a success and all this stuff. And then you brought in, like you and Connor and George spoke early on, you know, you have a little bit of that going on in here now at the moment in Northern Ireland. But it seems that the tourism in Northern Ireland, it is focused or in the North Coast or in Belfast, and everything else, Mid-Tyrone, Fermanagh here, it is completely forgotten. What do you think about, and what sort of things that we could do to kind of revert this tendency of having every resources implemented in those kind of big areas instead of bringing to us here in the West?
I'll jump in there. So, Rodolfo, it's important to understand that tourism in Northern Ireland is still a very young industry, and if you compare it to down south. So the focus up the North Coast and in Belfast itself has been driven by the attractions, really. So it's people have come to Belfast because of Titanic, and it's naturally the first point of contact when you fly into, or the biggest city with the most accommodation. And then secondly, the Causeway Coast. So Giant's Causeway has been the icon of Northern Ireland travel for, you know, the next 100 years. The way the programs and that we're looking to develop, there is an equal, maybe even an unequal representation now, is that we're trying to develop the regions, and it's so important for us to do that. But for you guys, that's an incredible opportunity, because you're in an opportunity, or in the stage where tourism is new, and it's not because the quality of the product is not there. It just hasn't been developed yet. So if you look at Sligo 15 years ago, it's very similar to what Fermanagh is like now, but there's no difference in terms of the quality of what you'll get in each region. So there is a lot of work to do in terms of how we get our trade to communicate and work together, how to develop an offering to help promote the region. And we're looking at doing that. It takes time, but for us, or for me personally, I think it's such an opportunity. I much prefer working in the likes of Fermanagh and Armagh, coming down and visiting these cities and seeing so much potential, as opposed to Belfast and that, where it's now getting to the point where it's, the travel is going to come anyway, and it's not maybe necessarily all the travel you want. You're wanting people to come and stay and really get under the skin and stay for longer. So if you have ideas or suggestions or best practice that you've learned elsewhere, let's talk about it and share. But ultimately, it's just we've only just really got started.
Okay, thank you very much, and I would like as well to congratulate the initiative of you guys, because actually what called my attention to this was actually the domestic market, because of course maybe for us here in Fermanagh will be even a little bit difficult to bring the international, not counting of course the Republic of Ireland, but to bring the international travel in here, because it is far away from international airports or the big centers. But we could do a lot better with the domestic influx, like from people even from the sorts of Belfast, Dublin, those people that they really don't want to see anymore, or they want to have a little bit of a different contact with the nature, or whatever you want to call nowadays. That has been really enlightening to see that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rodolfo. Sorry, I just saw. Yeah, there's another comment there just agreeing that tourism development needs to be supported by infrastructure, specifically relating to greenways for cycling.
Yeah, I think that's it.
So.
I think it's a really interesting point. I just would build on that slightly as well. And this of course I would advocate for this, but I think what it boils down to that is the infrastructure. But the question is, what is the infrastructure being informed by? Yeah. So I can make the link between a greenway, the capital investments to put a greenway in place, and the actual consumer need and motivation. And greenways is what I'd call is almost becoming a product or a generic trust mark for an experience. I think it's a good shorthand. But again, it's the question of how do we bring that as an infrastructural dimension or an infrastructural asset to life in the context of our destination, the consumer we want the most, and the overall experience. So yes, absolutely, the infrastructure and capital investment to improve infrastructure, public spaces, amenities, and all these things, they're big part of the picture going forward. But the more that they can be at least influenced by the consumer need, want, and motivation, the better, because it'll make more sense and be able to leverage it probably more quickly in the context of the overall tourism proposition.
Yeah. Anything else, folks? If there's nothing else, folks, like if anything does come to mind afterwards, you can of course contact us in the council, and I'm sure through that Conor and George would be happy to respond to anything. But in terms of the experience development process, again, if you've got ideas, if there's anything you'd like to discuss, please get in contact and we can help you to start to look at that and take you through the process with George and the rest of the team in TNI, and even just with ourselves at a local level in the first instance. There's we can do that and get you off the mark. The next in this series is happening next Wednesday, and it's going to focus on the marketing and communication. And again, Conor will lead us on that. He'll be joined by someone from TNI and then our lovely friends in from Lakeland Tourism as well, in terms of what is happening locally. So again, very much focusing on communicating with the domestic market in the first instance, which is going to be priority for the next 12 months even with this vaccine, it's going to be the priority. So again, folks, thank you all very much for your sorry, someone typing in here. Oh, just thank yous. Okay, so thank you very much for your time, and good luck over the next few weeks, folks, and take care of yourselves.
All right, thank